take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're flying.
Welcome back to Take Flight Podcast. This is episode 140 with myself, Daniel, for this week's Take Flight Takeaway. In this week's episode, I'm going to share how a recent trip to the US for work has given me the urge to want to move there with my family. So let's get right into it. Last month in June, I went to the US for work-related matters, and I extended my trip to see my family in the state of Georgia. Now, this isn't my first time in the US. For context, I went to New York for work, and as I would usually do when I'd go to the US, I'd extend my stay to see my cousin and her family who live in the state of Georgia, in Atlanta. And I've always enjoyed myself whilst there in Georgia. And the last time I was in New York was actually in 2016. And things have changed somewhat. There certainly are more buildings, especially where I was staying. But something that surprised me was just the sheer amount of litter that was on the streets. Anyway, I digress. We're not here to talk about New York. We're here to talk about why I've had the urge to want to move to the US. For additional context, my cousin and her family moved, I think it was last month in June, beginning of June. And I loved spending time with them in their old house. That old house to me was nice, perfect, and great. But they decided to move within the state again, not too far. And it's a very nice house. I love the house, beautiful from the outside and inside. And yeah, it was just great to spend time with them and to meet my latest niece, who was born just during the pandemic. And it was great to meet her as well. And whilst I was there, it was just something was different this time around. I'd been to their old house a couple of times, about 4 times in total. And this time around just seemed to be somewhat different. I think it's the fact that they moved and it was just a lovely neighborhood that they reside in. And whilst they were moving, or before they moved, should I say, my wife and I knew, and as something my wife loves to do is to search for houses in any area or location, just give her a budget and she'll just look. And that's something she was doing. And, you know, when they moved and when I was there, I was just talking about how beautiful the house was, how lovely it was. It's just so airy, so spacious compared to what's available in the UK, unless you've got a couple of million ready to spend on a house. It was just something I believe that was different to this time. And whilst I was there, for those who don't know, in the US, it's very unlikely to walk to places. Everyone has a car, especially if you live outside of the main cities. And so I would just go for a walk to get my steps in, and I'd walk around the neighborhood and around the area, doing about an hour walk each day. And something that was quite noticeable, especially if you live inside of London, the area that we live in is outside of London. So it's quite common to say hello to people, good morning, as you go for walks, as you pass by. But something that was particularly different was if someone was driving, they would still have the courtesy and decency to wave a wave of acknowledgement. So whilst I was walking, I was, without giving too much eye contact or to make it less obvious, I would see if they would wave and I would wave back. And as I would walk past someone, they would say good morning and I would do the same. And it was just really nice just to experience that friendliness in the neighborhood. I made a joke to my wife to say, yeah, we're moving to the US. And this is something we've not discussed at length or in depth before, but we've always just admired the houses in the US and just done searches from time to time just to see what's available, what's out there, and how much your money can go. And lo and behold, I think the time was around midnight in the UK when I sent this message to her. And she was in the UK as she didn't travel with me on this occasion. And she sent me a couple of houses, and one in particular was really, really nice. I said, oh, this is gorgeous. I sent it to my cousin. She says, oh, this house is only half a mile away. She's like, oh, let me send it to my realtor. I was like, okay, I didn't think anything of it. But less than 10 minutes later, she said, oh, my realtor will meet us there tomorrow at midday. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't expect to go and view a house whilst on this trip to the US. Anyway, needless to say, things escalated very quickly. And in total, in less than 15 hours, there I was outside the house that my wife had found. And this house was absolutely stunning. It was a 6-bed, 5-bath, had double ceiling walls in a living area, had a basement with a gym, had another bedroom and bathroom down there, had a garden that backed onto a golf course. And the basement itself, for anyone who knows me, knows I like to make drinks and cocktails, and this had a bar. And I was like, this has got me written all over it. And if you do follow me on my personal page, you'll have seen that I shared, not a tour, but I showed pictures of the house, parts of the house, and the videos, etc., which I'll probably do on the Instagram for this week, for this episode. But it was absolutely beautiful. I think there were about 4,000. It was about 4,000 square foot. It was just a lovely house. And what was great was the family that lived there. They vacated the property so that we could have the full half an hour of looking around the house and seeing everything for ourselves without any pressure. The realtor was great. He was nice, met us. He's even been in contact with us since we left. And lo and behold, I put down a deposit. I'm joking. I didn't put down the deposit, not on this occasion, but it was just a nice experience. My first house viewing in the US, and it was a very different experience to what you would have in the UK. And what else has stood out to me is the fact that there is just so much opportunity. There is so much green, so much space, and very different to the UK. And I think one thing to say is that house itself was $500,000. And if I was to compare that to what that would be in the UK, I'd estimate that to be about 1.6 to 2 million. It was also just the salt to the wound from the UK and how far your money doesn't go when it comes to property in the UK. Certainly not in the southern region anyway. And it's just with the cost of living increasing, with all these other rises that are happening concurrently, it's just ridiculous. But in the US, it just seems like, your money can go a lot further. I've also got a friend who moved to Atlanta recently, used to live in the UK, lives there with the family. And yeah, needless to say, he's living good, enjoying life, and looks very happy. With all of this said, there are many things that you need to factor in and take into consideration. That you can have the pros, you can have the cons to wanting to move or moving. Let's say that there are many opportunities, especially for work. I work remotely, so I'm sure there wouldn't be too many issues if I wanted to move because number one, I work for a US company, so I'm actually going to inquire just so I know the process and what the intricacies may be should I want to in the future. Atlanta is known for Black excellence. They have great schools, good education. There is sort of a no nonsense taken there when it comes to education. So it'll be great, especially with a young child who will be starting school, in the next 5 years. That'll be great. Have family there, have friends, as does my wife. There'll be a community. And where we live right now outside of London, we don't have family at a stone's throw away. When we want to see family, we have to, make time. It's can be tiring at times or a long day, but not that it's not worth it or we don't do it. It's just that that's a consideration that if we wanted to do that more easily or more freely, we would have to put up a lot more cash to buy what we have where we are now to have it closer to them. Of course, there are some drawbacks when you think about the public shootings that are happening in the US, one as recent as July 4th, and, condolences to the family and friends of those who've been affected. It's quite scary. Additionally, in Georgia, it's legal to carry a firearm without a license. So if you don't have a license, it needs to be concealed. So I would say it's normal, in inverted commas, to see someone with a firearm in a holster at their waist. Not that carrying guns is normal outside of the US, but in the US, it's very normal to have a firearm, whatever it may be. So that's one thing you'd have to really get your mind around, just seeing someone with a gun in their holster. And I'd say there's just the fear of the unknown of moving to another country without having lived there before, always been on holiday. So we'll definitely have to have a few more trips to ensure it's the right thing for us, as with many other factors that would have to consider. But it was something I said to my wife was many of us, our parents came from the motherland to settle in the UK or to live here, work here. At the time, they didn't look back. They're like, well, I have to make it work. I'm going to move. And I think sometimes in this day and age, we take in too many external voices, or we think too deeply about things rather than just taking that leap of faith and doing something. Not to say you shouldn't be considered in your decision. You shouldn't, want to make an informed decision, but also don't be afraid if it's the right decision for you at the time. Nevertheless, it's not something we're going to do right away, not something we're going to do next year. It's just something we toyed around with. Within 15 hours, I went to a house viewing, saw the house, was absolutely beautiful, and it was great. So we don't know what the future will hold, but if I was to move there, don't worry, the podcast will still exist. As you may know, we have never recorded an episode with all four of us in the same room. We've always done it remotely. And at one point in time, we were recording from 4 different countries and 4 different time zones. So nothing as extreme as -5 hours in the US, but I'm sure we could make it work for sure. But yes, so that's how a trip to the US has given me the urge to want to move. Let's see what the future has in store. So thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, if you have any feedback for us, find us on Instagram at Take Flight Podcast. And for those who listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or SoundCloud, feel free to jump onto YouTube, subscribe to our channel, and watch our episodes for an immersive 3D experience. Until next time, stay safe. God bless.
Take off, take flight with you. Yeah, for we never fly, but